YouTube, what's going on? It's HIGHMMA, and today we are here to discuss the upcoming UFC event, UFC 311, taking place on the 18th of January. And today we're going to be dropping some predictions. We're going to be talking about the card and not just the fights themselves, but other things just during fight week that I think are going to be happening. We're doing a full card breakdown, well, preview, I should say. So stay strapped in. Get your dick out of your palm, because we're about to start breaking down some fucking fights, man. Let's not fuck around. Let's just straight into the first one. The first fight we're talking about today is... The first fight that we are talking about today is Tagir Ulanbekov, and he's going to be taking on Clayton Carpenter, an undefeated prospect in the flyweight division right now. And in this fight, Ulanbekov is actually looking like the favorite. He trains with Team Khabib. He is a pretty good fighter. He's 15-2, so that's definitely not a record that you can turn your nose up at. But I don't know, man. Something is telling me to pick Carpenter in this fight. I feel like everyone's going to be picking Tagir Ulanbekov because, you know, Umar's on the card, Islam's on the card, Khabib's going to be around, and because he trains with them, it is going to give you the feeling that he might be more inclined to win. But when you actually look at Clayton Carpenter's record, you realize that this guy is actually pretty serious, man. He's got 3 wins in the UFC so far if you count his Contender Series win, and they were going to give him Steve Erceg in 2023, so you see the UFC were not hesitating to give him good competition. The last guy that he beat was literally 17-1 at the time, and that was late last year. So, you know, we know that Clayton's active and he's trying to build up a decent resume, so even if he walks away with a loss in this fight, the potential definitely still is there. But the fact that Tagir hasn't fought since 2023 and that he recently lost in a grappling match against Jussier Formiga, whoever the fuck that is, and the fact that even in the past he's lost to Tim Elliott just doesn't make me really that confident on him, because when I look through his resume, honestly, I don't really see any standout names that are really good fighters. So I'm going to be picking Carpenter. I'm going to pick Carpenter by decision, though. It is a bit of a risky pick, you know, Carpenter's going in here as the underdog, but I feel like he could get this shit done. So I'm going to pick him, but let's move on. The next fight that we are talking about is Ricky Turcios versus Bernardo Sopaj. Now, the last time that we saw Sopaj in the octagon, he was getting knocked out by a flying knee coming from Vinicius Oliveira. Now, even though he didn't do too bad in that fight, Vinicius is a really big prospect at the moment, and he's rising a lot of hype, so you can't really completely count out Sopaj just because he had that loss, you know, because Ricky Turcios, who he's about to be fighting, did recently lose to Raul Rosas Jr., and he doesn't necessarily have the best record of all time himself either. You know, he's lost to Zahabi as well. The only wins that he has in the UFC have been by a split decision. You know, it doesn't look that great. That being said, I am a pretty big Turcios fan. I like this guy, and he is only 31. He has time to expand his game and get a little bit better. But Sopaj is only 24, and he is a little bit small for bantamweight, but I do feel like in good time, he could really expand his skill set and become a great fighter, because the last time he lost before that Vinicius Oliveira fight was 2021. And I don't know, Turcios just hasn't been consistent enough for me to feel confident enough in his ability to pick him. So I'm going to be rolling with Sopaj in this fight to possibly pick up a finish. You never know, but I'm going to lean more towards a decision. But let's move on to the next one we've got to talk about today, because it is Zach Reese versus Azamat Bekoev. This is a replacement. I'm pretty sure that Zach Reese was supposed to be fighting Cedricus Dumas, but now he's fighting Bekoev, who actually seems to be a bit of a harder fight for him. He's riding a great win streak. He hasn't lost since 2021. So I'm feeling pretty confident on this guy, considering that I've seen Zach Reese lose in the UFC before. He lost to Cody Brundage, and even though he did get a 20-second KO last year, that was against Julian Marquez, who is 9-4, so you can't really hold that to a really high regard, especially when he's going in there with Bekoev, who is 18-3, way more fight experience than Reese, who's only sitting in at 8-1 right now. I feel like it is the smart move to pick Bekoev in this fight, and because it's his UFC debut, I think more people are going to be counting him out. So if you want to make some easy cash, I say put that shit on Bekoev, more than likely winning by decision. But let's move on to the next fight we're talking about today, which is Grant Dawson versus Diego Ferreira, an absolutely insane fight taking place in the lightweight division, just outside of the rankings. Grant Dawson with the crazy grappling, looking like an insane prospect. right now. He did get kind of fraud checked last year by Bobby Green. Wait, no, it wasn't even last year. It was 2023. But we don't know if that was a fraud check or just a fluke. You know, he picked up 2 wins in 2024. But the thing is, if that was a fraud check, he's definitely getting fraud checked again because he's taking on Diego Ferreira next. A bit of an old head, you know what I mean? A bit of a crafty vet. He's 39, but he is riding a 2-fight KO streak right now. He fraud checked Rebecca last year, who recently beat Oral By in an absolute war. We know that that guy's legit. And he also finished Michael Johnson. Even though Michael Johnson was old at the time, it is still MJ. That is still an impressive win. And Ferreira does have good names on his resume, you know, like Anthony Pettis, Jared Gordon. You know, these aren't terrible fighters, but I just don't know if he's going to have the grappling ability to deal with Grant Dawson. You know, he was scrambling pretty well with Gamrot and with Rebecca, but it wasn't enough. And overall, I just don't know if it's going to be enough for taking out Grant Dawson. I feel like Grant Dawson has that dog in him. He's beaten some decent guys before, you know, Damir Mazgulov, that's a good win. And Jared Gordon as well. So I'm going to go with what I think is probably going to be considered more of the safer pick here. And I'm going to go for Grant Dawson getting the win. I think it'll probably more than likely be via ground and pound. I think that he's going to get Ferreira into an awkward spot and overwhelm him with lots of ground and pound and pick up the win. So I'm going with Grant Dawson, but let's not waste any time. Let's move on to the next fight we're talking about today because it is Bogdan Guskov versus Billy Elakana, some absolute random that they've replaced Johnny Walker with. I'm not too sure what's going on with Walker. Maybe he got chinned by his sparring partner in the lead up to the fight, but I don't really know much about this Billy Elakana guy, but I was going to be picking Guskov via finish anyway, via a round 2 TKO, so I'm still going to roll with that pick because I really do feel like Bogdan Guskov is a future top 10 contender and he's going to prove it in this fight. So I'm going to go with Guskov via round 2 TKO. Not too much to say. So let's move on to the next fight we've got to talk about today, which is Jailton Almeida versus Sergey Spivak. A really, really good heavyweight fight. Now, Jailton Almeida is the favorite going into this fight. You know, he's got that really good jiu-jitsu that we've seen on display lots and lots of times in the heavyweight division now. He picked up that win against Alexander Romanov. You know, he's beaten Derek Lewis. He did lose to Curtis Blades in round 2 last year, but he was doing great in that fight leading up to the finish. And I feel like the finish was a little bit fluky. You know, it just didn't really seem like a clean-cut finish. And, you know, he's beaten Rosenstruik as well. He's got good names on his resume, and he's also got that lighter man skill. He did go up from light heavyweight, but you can't expect him to walk through Sergey Spivak in the same way that he did Romanov when you consider the fact that Spivak is a really solidified heavyweight contender. He's only 29 and he's 17-4, and he's beaten the likes of Derek Lewis before. He's beaten Greg Hardy, who's a bit of a fucking shit fighter, but he's beaten Tai Tuivasa as well, and he's not exactly completely useless on the ground. We've seen him pick up a couple of ground and pound finishes before, a couple of submissions, and Jailton Almeida is probably going to be wanting to take this to the ground if he wants to see any success. So we will have to see if the jiu-jitsu of Almeida is enough to overpower Spivak. Personally, I think it will be, which is why I'm rolling with Jailton Almeida, and I'm going to pick him via a round 2 submission. I'm going to pick him probably via a rear naked choke. I feel like at some point he's going to take the back of Spivak and he's not going to get off of that shit. But there's not much more to say about this fight, so I'm going to move on to the next fight I want to talk about today, which is Peyton Talbot versus Raoni Barcelos. Now, even though personally I feel like Peyton Talbot is yet to be tested in the UFC, I feel like we need to see him take on like a Saeed Nurmagomedov or Fareed Basharat or maybe even Vinicius Oliveira, someone with some real skill. As I can't lie, I'm not completely on the hype train. I don't know if he is as good as everybody is trying to make you believe he is, but this guy that he's about to fight, Barcelos, he's lost to Kyler Phillips, he's lost to Umar Nurmagomedov, he's lost to Victor Henry, he's lost to Valiev, and those last 2 motherfuckers, who are these people, you know what I mean? It's not like he's losing to people that are absolutely amazing every single time he does lose. Don't get me wrong, he's had some decent wins before, he's beaten Saeed Nurmagomedov in the past, but I really feel like he's just a sitting duck here waiting for Talbot to finish him so that Talbot can go on to get a little bit of a bigger fight in the division. I really feel like he is just going to be that guy that is there wearing the kick me sign in this fucking fight, man. I'm not going to lie. I think it's going to be an early finish for Peyton Talbot. I'm going to be picking a round 1 or 2 TKO. I don't think there's really too much to say about this fight. I just feel like Peyton is going to put a crazy pace on him with the striking, and it's going to be too much for Barcelos to take. Now, if Barcelos does end up fraud checking Peyton Talbot, which I think is very unlikely, I think that will prove my suspicions about Talbot not being a top 5 ranked level fighter, but I do think that he is good enough to at least get past Barcelos, which is why I'm picking him in this fight. But let's say no more about this, because I can't really think of what to fucking say. Let's move on to the next fight we're talking about today. It is Renier Derrida versus Kevin Holland, taking place in middleweight. This is looking to be a really good fight. A fight where I'm going to be leaning more towards Renier Derrida, I'm not going to lie. A lot of this fight and a lot of the reason why I'm picking RDR is actually just based off of the feeling. There's not a lot of logic that is going into this pick, I'm not going to lie. I just feel like the fact that Renier came into the UFC looking kind of reminiscent of Dricus, and he's just gone in there with GM3, hasn't looked the greatest, but has shown that his grappling is there. You know, Gerald Meerschaert isn't completely to be slept on the ground, and even though, yeah, it was a bit of a sloppy fight, RDR ended up getting the finish, looking like a fucking dolphin on the ground afterwards. I always call this guy the Dolphin, but he's got a serious test coming up next. You know, he's taking on Kevin Holland, who we all know is a pretty well-rounded fighter, but I just don't know if he's going to be good enough to take out RDR. I don't know. Something is telling me to pick RDR. We saw him go in there and just give up basically against Roman Dolidze with that rib injury. I don't know how bad that was. I could just be slating him here, I don't know. But we saw him lose to Michael Page as well in a bit of a boring fight if you go back and watch that. And, you know, you're actually unbiased with yourself. He lost to Jack Della Maddalena by a split decision. I've seen a couple people cry about that fight. But then when you consider things like the fact that he lost to Stephen Thompson, an old Stephen Thompson that is, he got dominated by Hamzat, and he's lost to Brunson and Vittori in the past, who are also kind of mid-names. And don't get me wrong, he's got a load of great wins. He's beaten Buckley, he's beaten this guy and the next. I just don't know if he has the skill to take out RDR. I feel like RDR is going to be a little bit more successful in the ground exchanges. I feel like RDR is going to be more inclined to hop on a submission and actually get it, as opposed to Kevin Holland. Now, don't get me wrong, Kevin Holland had that really good armbar against Oleg Zajic, but that is Oleg Zajic, who is no longer in the UFC. So when you really think about the skill gap between Oleg Zajic and RDR, I think we're going to see RDR out-grapple Kevin Holland and walk away with the win. This is a bit of an awkward pick. I'm pretty sure RDR is going in as the underdog, so we'll have to wait and see if my hunch is correct, but there's not much more to say about this fight. So let's move on to the next, because we are talking about Beneil Dariush versus my GOAT, Renato Moicano. If you're a long-time fan of the channel, you know that I fucking love Renato Moicano, and I am 100% picking him in this fight, even though I think more people are leaning towards Dariush. I think they're trusting in the knockout power of Dariush because of the fact that Moicano is a little bit chinny, but I'm going to be rolling with Moicano because, you know, Dariush is riding a 2-fight loss streak. He hasn't won since 2022. Even though he has only lost to the best competition in the division, when you think about the fact he's lost to Oliveira and Sarukian, I just don't know if he's been active enough to go in there and beat someone that's riding so much momentum like Moicano. Moicano, who looks to be in the best shape of his career. He picked up 3 wins in the UFC last year and seems to be like in a second prime or something. I don't fucking know, man. His ground and pound looked really good against BSD, and he showed that he's got grit and durability against fucking Jalen Turner. We saw him get dropped and then still come back and find that TKO finish. I think that we might see him find a TKO finish here against Beneil Dariush. I think he's going to get him down and outwork him on the ground, and I don't know if he's going to be able to find the submission. Dariush isn't a complete fucking sitting duck on the ground. He might do though, but I think it'll more than likely be an accumulation of ground and pound that will just end up being too much for Dariush and end up putting him out of the fight. I'm picking fucking Moicano, bro. Ain't no way I'm picking Dariush in this one. Moicano's looked really good last year, and I don't see any reasons to not be picking him going into this fight. So I will be, and you know what? I don't really think there's too much more I have to say. So we're going to move on to the next fight on the card, which is Jamal Hill versus Yuri Prohaska, a fight that I have been waiting for so long. My favorite fighter in light heavyweight, Jamal Hill, taking on my least favorite fighter at light heavyweight in Yuri Prohaska. Now, I'm going to be picking Jamal Hill via round 1 or 2 KO in this fight. I think he's going to finish Yuri, bro. I think in that second Pereira fight, Yuri took way too much fucking damage. He left with his fucking ponytail gun lean into the left, bro. I don't know what the fuck was going on with that. I think he took way too much damage, and I really think, even though it sounds like cope, Jamahal Hill is kind of right in saying that he got caught, but Yuri got finished. Yuri got finished bad, and I don't necessarily know if he's going to be completely recovered going into this fight. Jamahal Hill is someone with really heavy hands, and he's not a slouch on the feet. And we've seen Yuri Prohaska get outpointed before. We saw in that Rakic fight until the TKO. Rakic was actually dealing with Yuri pretty well. He was working the leg kick, and he was outlanding him. I think that Rakic was doing really well. Pereira, obviously, clearly has already beaten him in terms of kickboxing. Personally, I feel like Jamahal Hill is a better kickboxer than Yuri Prohaska, bro. This guy keeps his hands at his fucking waist. He's chinny as hell. We always see him getting fucking wobbled. He struggled with an old man Glover for 5 rounds and got the luckiest submission I've ever seen in my life. Jamahal Hill absolutely dog walked him for 5 rounds. Another thing I think I have to say about Jamahal Hill going into this fight is he's only 12-2. You know what I mean? He's not actually that far into his fight career. People need to start counting him out because there isn't as much fight tape to see on Jamahal as there is Yuri Prohaska, who's 30-5. Now, don't get me wrong, that 30 wins can look impressive, but when most of them aren't at the highest level in the UFC, you can't really consider them to be as great as Jamahal Hill's. He has had to grow as a fighter and expand his skill set within the UFC, where the competition is going to be harder and he is going to get punished more for things such as bad defense, where Yuri is now getting punished. I think Jamahal Hill's going to be a little bit more defensively sound in this fight, and I feel like he is going to find the KO early in the fight. Let's fucking go. I'm so hyped for this shit. You don't understand. Everybody hates Jamahal Hill for some fucking reason, and they like to act like he's just gonna get chinned easily, as if Yuri is one of the most chinny fighters in the fucking division. Bro, we're rolling with Jamahal Hill. I don't give a shit. We're taking the fucking belt in 2025. We will do this shit. The Jamahal Hill hype train is fucking here, boys. It starts now. I'm so fucking happy. I'm so fucking excited. Let's see this shit, man. It is fucking time. But there isn't too much more I can say about this shit before I fucking explode, bro. I'm getting hella zesty up in here. I don't even know what to say. So let's move on to the next fight that I've got to talk about today. It is Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab Dvalishvili, one of the highest level fights on the card in terms of skill. We've got Umar Nurmagomedov coming off of a really good win against Corey Sandhagen, a fight in which he 50-45, one of the highest fight IQ fighters in the division, and now he's going in there to take a relentless grappler on in Merab Dvalishvili. Now, I feel like Corey Sandhagen didn't have the level of grappling required to take out a Merab Dvalishvili, but I feel like Umar Nurmagomedov might. I feel like Umar really might have the technical grappling skill to outwork Merab in the submissions department and get him in a bad spot and lock up a choke. I feel like that could happen. As you see, Merab goes for a lot of takedowns. He's always keeping it up with the pressure and trying to get the fighter up against the fence and run up the control time so he can also recover his cardio. But I just don't think that's going to work against Umar, who has great cage control and also has the kind of dynamic striking required to hold off Merab on the feet. We see that Umar actually relies a lot on his kicks, which was what Sean O'Malley needed to use more in their fight. As we saw in round 5, Sean could have finished Merab if there was an extra 30 seconds. We saw that front heap to the body worked really well. If we see Umar working kicks like front heaps and shit, keeping Merab at bay in this fight, and then when Merab is coming in to try and use his high pressure takedowns, it might not work. He might be a little bit gassed out against Umar, who is training with Team Khabib, highest level fighters on the planet. You know that this guy's not just going to gas out in 3 rounds. And I'm not saying that Merab is ever going to gas out, but we saw at the end of that Sean O'Malley fight, he was looking battered and bruised. And Sean O'Malley isn't as high level as Umar Nurmagomedov. Sean O'Malley can't hang in there on the ground and the feet in the same ways that Umar Nurmagomedov can. And considering the fact that Umar Nurmagomedov, who's just got out there in 50-45, one of the best fighters in the division, I'm going to be picking him in this fight. I don't really think a unimpressive win over Sean O'Malley is enough to sell me the fact that you're going to beat Umar Nurmagomedov. You know, it's even when people bring up the Cejudo fight. Oh my god, the Cejudo fight, but it was so good. Yeah, but it's a washed Cejudo that also rocked Merab in that fight. I'm not impressed by the Cejudo fight either, as much as, you know, yeah, the grappling exchanges were good, but if you're getting wobbled by old man Cejudo, what the fuck is Umar Nurmagomedov gonna do to you if he connects with one of those question mark kicks or some shit, bro? I'm picking Umar. I don't care. It's for this fucking plan, and we're rolling with Dagestan on this card, boys. I'm not even gonna fucking lie. I'm picking Umar Nurmagomedov by a decision. I don't think he's gonna have what it takes to finish Merab. I feel like Merab's gas tank in his chin is just that good to deal with Umar, but I feel like overall he is going to get outworked in this fight, and I'm picking Umar Nurmagomedov. So let's move on to the final fight we have to talk about today, boys. It is the main event. It is Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan, one of the highest level rematches we've ever seen at 155. Obviously, we saw this fight take place a couple years ago, and Islam Makhachev won. It was really close, though. The grappling exchanges were really competitive, and we saw on the feet, they were both getting some decent work off. Islam Makhachev's striking has increased skill-wise significantly since that fight, and we've seen Islam Makhachev go on to become a dominant champion. He also picked up that win against Dustin Poirier last year, where he fought with staff and still finished Dustin. That was really impressive. And we've seen Arman going on a good run too, you know what I mean? He's beaten Oliveira, even though a couple of points in that fight against Oliveira, he wasn't in a good spot. You know, he had to pull his fucking shorts down to get out of that one submission. I know we haven't all forgotten about that. And now he's taking on Islam Makhachev, who managed to fucking submit Oliveira. I don't know, man. I feel like people might be overrating Arman's skill a little bit going into this one. And I also think the fact that Islam had staff and didn't look his usual self against Dustin Poirier may be getting into people's heads a little bit, because they're going to be going back to watch fight tape, and they're going to be seeing the latest fights of the two fighters, and they're going to see Islam not looking as good as he usually does. Like I said, you know, you look at that Poirier fight, you can see it. But in this fight, I feel like he's coming into it fresh. I think he's coming off of a leg injury or some shit like that. I don't know. But, you know, everyone's always going into fights with fucking injuries. It's MMA. This isn't fucking football, bro. It's not basketball. This is MMA. This is fighting. I feel like Islam Makhachev, with the amount that he trains and the insane durability he has, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. And I feel like, even though, yes, Arman Tsarukyan is a really good fighter, he takes a lot of risks on the feet. You know, you always see him going for these spinning attacks and shit like that. And we do see him gas out sometimes. Look at the fucking Gamrot fight. He gassed out. And I feel like doing those stupid fucking spinning attacks, well, not that they're stupid, but, you know, if one of them misses, it's going to look like a stupid mistake if you're in there with fucking Islam Makhachev, who is instantly going to grab onto a leg and take you to the ground and finish you in the ways that he has done Oliveira and Poirier. And I also think that Islam Makhachev's striking has improved so much that now the reach advantage that he is going to have over Tsarukyan is going to come in handy. And I think overall, he's going to outwork Arman Tsarukyan in this fight. I think it's going to go the full 5 rounds, and we're going to see Islam Makhachev walk away with about 4 of those fucking rounds, because I feel like Arman Tsarukyan is going to be more inclined to grapple, because he's going to realize that the striking is going to be one of his disadvantages, and I think he's going to get a bit too desperate to take it to the ground, and Makhachev is just going to make him pay for that. He's going to sprawl out, and he's going to get a lot of control time in this fight. But I'm going to be picking Islam Makhachev. I think he's going to outwork fucking Arman in the striking and grappling department. I think early on, Arman might see a lot more success in the grappling than he will later in the fight. I think he will gas out in this fight, and I think Islam isn't going to have staff, and he's going to show that his gas tank still is there, and it is still really good. Hopefully his defense has improved a little bit from the Poirier fight, though, in terms of the striking. We'll have to wait and see, boys. But I'm going to wrap up today's video there. I'd like to thank you all for watching. This has taken ages to fucking make, but I hope you're all hyped for 311 like I am. And you know what I'm going to say. You don't have to like. You don't have to subscribe. Do what the fuck you want, man. But I hope you have a nice day, evening, night, whatever the fuck you're doing. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.